The polished mahogany of Dwyer Ventures' conference table reflected the faces of partners half my age as Thaddeus Blackwell concluded his presentation. His projected returns for the Lakefront Commons development were, to my experienced eye, suspiciously aggressive. Questions? Thaddeus spread his hands, his custom Italian suit tight across shoulders that suggested more time at the gym than analyzing market trends. These projections assume a 22% increase in luxury rental demand, I said, tapping the spreadsheet before me. That's double the historical average for that district, even in boom years. A slight smile played at Thaddeus's lips. Cassian, the market is evolving. Sometimes traditional metrics don't capture emerging trends. I noticed Brandon, our youngest partner, exchange a glance with Melissa, the kind of look that translated to, "There goes Cassian again," stuck in the past. Evolution doesn't invalidate fundamentals, I countered. I'd like to see the assumptions behind these projections broken down by segment. Of course, Thaddeus replied smoothly, though several of your partners have already reviewed them in detail and found them quite sound. I kept my expression neutral, despite the implication. Several partners had met with Thaddeus without me. We'll discuss this further at next week's investment committee, I said, closing my portfolio. Thank you for your time, Mr. Blackwell. As everyone filed out, handshakes and backslaps exchanged with Thaddeus, I remained seated. My eye caught the group photograph on the wall, taken the day we founded the firm. My hair was darker then, my smile wider. The plaque beneath it read, "Integrity before profit." I checked my watch. Just enough time to change before meeting Serafina for our anniversary dinner. 30 years today. La Maison Azur had been our anniversary destination for 20 years. The maitre d' recognized me immediately. "Mr. Dwyer, your usual table awaits. Mrs. Dwyer has not yet arrived." I smoothed my tie and touched the small package in my jacket pocket, a first edition copy of Economic Symbolism in Victorian Literature, aligned with Serafina's academic background before she transitioned to charity work. 15 minutes later, she arrived in a rush of apologies and Chanel perfume. "The foundation meeting ran long," she said, kissing my cheek. Thaddeus had endless questions about donor demographics. I noted the perfume, not the one I'd given her last Christmas. "Mr. Blackwell seems quite involved with the charity lately." "He's bringing fresh perspectives," she replied, immediately checking her phone as it vibrated. "His development background is invaluable for our building project." Throughout dinner, her phone buzzed repeatedly. Each time she'd glance down, type quickly, then offer abbreviated responses to my questions about her day. "Tell me about the scholarship selections," I asked, refilling her wine glass. "You were excited about one candidate in particular, the young woman from Southside." Oh yes, Daria. Exceptional essay," Serafina answered, before her attention returned to her phone. When I presented the wrapped book, she smiled distractedly. "Thank you, darling. I'll enjoy this." She hadn't even removed the paper to see what it was. Halfway through dessert, her phone lit up again. "I'm so sorry, Cassian. There's an emergency with the gala venue. I need to handle this tonight." She gathered her purse, leaving the gift on the table. "Don't wait up. This could take hours." After she left, I settled the bill, noticing her forgotten phone on the seat. As I reached for it, a preview notification caught my eye. "Thaddeus, meet me at the Drake instead. Told Isolde I'm in meetings all." The message preview ended there. The Drake was a hotel in Chicago, our home city. At midnight, I sat in my home office, financial statements illuminated by my desk lamp. Serafina still wasn't home. Her explanation about the venue emergency didn't align with what I'd seen on her phone. I pulled up our credit card statements, scrolling methodically through recent charges. There it was. A room at the Drake Hotel 2 weeks ago on a night Serafina had claimed to be at a charity retreat in Lake Forest. Next, I examined our joint accounts. Over the past 4 months, Serafina had transferred nearly $200,000 to an investment vehicle I didn't recognize, Blackwell Lakefront Partners. I texted Helen, my executive assistant, for 15 years. Me. Helen, sorry for the late message. Quick question. What was the date of the Charity Committee's Lake Forest retreat last month? Her response came surprisingly quickly. Helen, no retreat last month, sir. Committee meetings all held at Foundation offices downtown. Everything okay? I didn't answer. Instead, I called the Drake Hotel. Reservations, please, I said when the operator answered. I need to confirm a booking from the 14th. Name, please. Blackwell. Thaddeus Blackwell. Yes, Mr. Blackwell had our Lake Michigan suite that evening. Would you like to book it again? No, thank you. I hung up and stared at our wedding photograph on my desk. 30 years of what I thought was partnership. I opened my contacts and scrolled to M for Maxwell Reed, a private investigator I'd used for due diligence on sensitive investments. As I pressed dial, I glanced once more at our wedding photo. Serafina's smile seemed different now, a stranger's expression frozen in time. 1 week later, I sat in a private room at the Chicago Executive Club across from Maxwell Reed. His weathered face revealed nothing as he slid a thick manila folder across the table. It's all there, Mr. Dwyer. 2 weeks of surveillance, financial traces, and communication intercepts were legally obtained. I opened the folder with steady hands that belied my churning stomach. The first page contained photographs, Serafina and Thaddeus entering the Drake, his hand possessively at the small of her back. Another showed them at a restaurant in Evanston, fingers intertwined across the table, her wedding ring clearly visible. How long? I asked, my voice even. From what I've gathered, approximately 4 months, though there were business meetings for at least 2 months prior. I turned to the financial section. Maxwell had connected dots I'd only begun to see. Thaddeus had set up multiple investment vehicles, each funneling money from wealthy Chicagoans, many from my own client list, into increasingly opaque holding companies. This structure, Maxwell said, pointing to a diagram, is consistent with a Ponzi scheme. New investor funds paying returns to early investors, with substantial amounts diverted to personal accounts. I turned to transcripts from a recorded conversation in Thaddeus's car, legally obtained through a PI ruse that Maxwell didn't elaborate on. Thaddeus: Cassian still thinks due diligence means reading every footnote personally. How does a dinosaur like that still run a firm? Serafina, laughing: He's predictable, always has been. That's why it's so easy to work around him. Thaddeus: His investors trust him, which makes them perfect targets. They never question his associates' recommendations. Serafina: The foundation board is the same. They'd follow him off a cliff out of respect for his parents' memory. My coffee sat untouched, growing cold as I flipped through more evidence. I'd like you to dig deeper into the financial connections, I said finally, and continue monitoring their communications. I need to understand the full scope before taking action. Will do. And Mr. Dwyer, for what it's worth, I've done this work for 20 years. What they're saying about you in these recordings, it says more about them than you. I nodded, tucking the folder into my briefcase as I glanced at my watch. I appreciate that, Maxwell. I have a board meeting to attend. I arrived at the Dwyer Ventures boardroom 5 minutes early, but conversation was already underway. I paused outside the door when I heard my name. Cassian's caution was an asset in the 90s, but markets move faster now, Brandon was saying. We can't keep losing opportunities while he insists on his grandfather's due diligence timeline. Thaddeus says the lakefront deal's best units will be allocated this week, Melissa added. If we wait for Cassian's complete analysis, we'll miss the window. I entered, noting how their postures straightened, conversations shifting seamlessly to market forecasts. My name on the wall behind them, Dwyer Ventures, founded on principles that suddenly seemed quaint to my own partners. Minutes later, Thaddeus arrived, greeting everyone with familiar ease that suggested this wasn't his first visit without my knowledge. I've prepared updated projections based on our discussions last week, he announced, distributing tablets rather than the paper reports I preferred. His presentation skillfully addressed surface-level concerns I'd raised previously while introducing new premium investment tiers available only to forward-thinking early partners. These exclusive units are moving quickly, he emphasized, with a meaningful look at Brandon. Several of Chicago's most respected firms have already secured their positions. Which firms specifically? I asked, noticing how the room subtly tensed. I can't disclose all participants, but Wellington Partners and Granite Trust are both substantially committed. I made a note. Both firms had reputations for aggressive growth over sound fundamentals. I'd like to see the construction loan terms and municipal approvals before our next discussion, I said. Thaddeus's smile didn't waver. Of course, though your partners have already reviewed those documents, right, Brandon? Brandon nodded, avoiding my eyes. Then I'd like to see them personally, I replied, my tone making clear this wasn't optional. Along with the complete investor list and subscription agreements. The meeting continued, but I observed how partners physically oriented toward Thaddeus, as if my chair at the head of the table were already vacant. When we adjourned, I didn't join the cluster around Thaddeus. Instead, I texted Helen to meet me in my office immediately. Helen closed my office door, her normally efficient demeanor hesitant. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Chicago skyline outside my window. You wanted to see me, Mr. Dwyer? Helen, you've been with me 15 years. In that time, have I ever asked you to lie for me? Never, sir. Then I need your honesty now. I suspect information is being shared outside proper channels, and my wife's involvement with the foundation is overlapping with firm business in concerning ways. Helen's hands tightened around her tablet. I've noticed patterns, sir. Mrs. Dwyer's visits to the office have increased since Mr. Blackwell became a potential investment partner. Go on. She's accessed the investor contact database 3 times in the past month. When I asked why, she said it was for gala invitations, but she only downloaded high net worth clients. Helen hesitated, then continued. I've also noted discrepancies in her schedule, times when she claimed to be at foundation meetings but wasn't. I considered mentioning it, but it wasn't your place to question my wife, I finished for her. I understand. She looked relieved. There's more. Mr. Blackwell has contacted several of your long-term clients directly. I know because they called to confirm his relationship with the firm. Thank you for telling me this. I'd like you to pull together a list of those clients and any documentation of these interactions. Already prepared, sir. She handed me a folder. I've been keeping records, just in case. I accepted it, genuinely moved by her foresight and loyalty. Helen, in the coming weeks, things might become complicated. I may need your discretion and support. You've always treated me with respect, Mr. Dwyer. That's earned my loyalty, not just my employment. Schedule meetings with our top 10 investors for next week, I said. Tell them it's a confidential portfolio review, and Helen, thank you. After she left, I opened her folder, finding meticulously documented dates, times, and details of Serafina's unusual activities. The foundation I'd built wasn't just being undermined from the outside, but from within my own home. 2 weeks later, Maxwell Reed returned with his final report. It was past midnight in my office as he connected a small digital recorder to specialized speakers. This was captured during their meeting at the Blackwell Lake House last weekend, Maxwell explained. Mrs. Dwyer told you she was at a charity planning retreat. What you're about to hear may be difficult. He pressed play, and Serafina's laughter filled the room, a sound I hadn't heard at home in months. Serafina. You should have seen Cassian's face when the foundation board approved your building proposal without his precious due diligence. He still thinks his name on the door means something. Thaddeus, mimicking my voice. I'd like to see a complete structural engineering analysis before proceeding. God, does he analyze you like that in bed too? More laughter from my wife. Serafina. 30 years of missionary position with quarterly performance reviews. Thaddeus. Well, in 6 months, you won't have to endure that anymore. Once the lakefront project launches, we'll have enough to disappear. I'm thinking Antibes or Majorca. Serafina. What about Isolda? She'll fight the divorce. Thaddeus. Isolda will accept what I give her. Unlike your husband, I didn't make the mistake of putting my wife's name on everything. Serafina. Speaking of which, I transferred another $500,000 from our art fund. Cassian never checks it. He thinks paintings are for looking at, not investing in. My knuckles whitened around the armrest, but my face remained impassive. Maxwell continued playing selected recordings from different days. A methodical plan emerged. Thaddeus was operating a sophisticated Ponzi scheme with Serafina's help, using my reputation to lend credibility and access my investor network. Meanwhile, they planned to transfer assets, including the foundation named for my parents, to their control. The financial documents confirm it, Maxwell said, opening another file. Mr. Blackwell's lakefront development is mostly fictional. The permits he claims to have are either forged or preliminary. The construction company listed in his materials doesn't exist beyond a website created 3 months ago. He showed me bank records. Mrs. Dwyer has transferred approximately $3.2 million from your joint accounts into Blackwell's shell companies over the past 6 months. I sat perfectly still, processing everything. The betrayal wasn't just personal. They were systematically targeting everything I'd built, everyone who trusted me. There's one more thing you should know, Maxwell said. While investigating Blackwell, I discovered something else, something about your past. The foundation boardroom featured a portrait of my parents above the polished conference table. My father's stern expression seemed to judge the proceedings as Thaddeus once again commanded attention. The traditional donor approach has served the foundation well, he was saying, but to reach our expanded goals, we need innovative engagement strategies. I studied the committee members, mostly longtime Chicago philanthropists, who'd supported my parents' original mission of educational access for underprivileged students. Today, they nodded along as Thaddeus proposed shifting focus to high-visibility architectural projects. The Blackwell Learning Center would serve as both educational facility and statement piece for the foundation, he continued, displaying renderings of a glass and steel structure that had nothing to do with our mission of providing scholarships. This would require reallocating approximately 60% of our scholarship endowment, I noted, keeping my tone neutral despite knowing exactly what he was attempting. Temporarily, Thaddeus clarified smoothly, the visibility would ultimately increase donations tenfold. I agree with Thaddeus, Serafina interjected. We've been doing the same thing for decades. It's time for bold moves. I observed her carefully. The woman who once shared my passion for helping disadvantaged students now dismissed that work as outdated. She wore the emerald earrings I'd given her for our 25th anniversary while advocating to dismantle what my parents had built. Before redirecting funds established for specific purposes, I said, we should review the original donor intent restrictions. Cassian, Margaret Wilson, a board member of 20 years, sighed. Perhaps we're being too cautious. Thaddeus's proposal is exciting. What about the students currently receiving support? I asked. The reduction would affect approximately 43 current scholarship recipients. Thaddeus waved dismissively. They could reapply for the reduced number of scholarships. And the stronger candidates would still receive funding. Interesting, I replied. Since you've studied our program so thoroughly, you must be familiar with Jason Torres, class of 2017? Thaddeus blinked. Of course. Exceptional young man. He is indeed, though he graduated in 2019, not 2017, and his name is Jacob, not Jason. An uncomfortable silence fell across the room. Simple mistake, Thaddeus recovered. The point remains. The point, I interrupted, standing slowly, is that this foundation carries my parents' legacy. They believed education was a lifeline, not an architectural statement. I'll need to consider any fundamental mission shift very carefully. I gathered my papers. If you'll excuse me, I have another appointment. We'll continue this discussion next week. As I left, I heard Thaddeus immediately resume, his voice reassuring the committee that my concerns were addressable. I didn't look back at Serafina, though I felt her eyes following me out. Alone in my office that night, surrounded by Maxwell's evidence, the full weight of betrayal finally descended. My chest tightened, a cold sweat breaking across my forehead. For a moment, I feared a heart attack, an ironic end after surviving this discovery. I loosened my tie, focusing on deep breaths. On my desk sat photographs of Serafina and Thaddeus together. Financial documents showing millions diverted, transcripts of them mocking not just me, but my life's work. And beside them, the most unexpected discovery of all, documentation of a son I never knew existed. According to Maxwell's investigation, before meeting Serafina, I had briefly dated a woman named Elizabeth Mercer during my final year of business school. What I hadn't known was that after our amicable breakup, she discovered she was pregnant. She never told me, and raised our son Lucian alone until her death 5 years ago. Lucian Mercer was now 37, a financial analyst specializing in fraud detection. The irony wasn't lost on me. My unknown son worked to uncover exactly the type of scheme my wife was helping perpetrate. I picked up the photograph of Lucian. The resemblance was undeniable, the same jawline, the same analytical eyes that looked back at me from the mirror. A lifetime of lost moments crashed over me. His first words, first steps, graduations, all while I built a company and foundation, thinking I was creating a legacy. "Dad," I whispered to my father's photograph on the wall, "what would you do?" The portrait offered no answer, but I knew anyway. My father had always said integrity wasn't tested when things were easy, but when doing the right thing cost you something precious. A single tear escaped before I wiped it away firmly. Self-pity was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not now. I straightened my tie, took a deep breath, and opened my laptop. The document I created was titled simply, Asset Security Protocol. The first item, contact Martha Goldstein, attorney, 8:00 a.m. tomorrow. The betrayal was complete. Now would come the response. Martha Goldstein's corner office overlooked Millennium Park, though neither of us was admiring the view. At 72, she'd been my attorney for 30 years, handling everything from venture capital deals to the foundation's establishment. The wall behind her desk displayed photos of us at various firm milestones, breaking ground on our building, opening the foundation, receiving the Ethics in Business Award. "Jesus Christ, Cassian," she said, removing her reading glasses after reviewing Maxwell's evidence for the past hour. "This is comprehensive." I needed to be certain before proceeding. She nodded, pragmatism reasserting itself. "You were right to come immediately. We need to secure your assets and document Serafina's financial misconduct before they realize you know." "I've already frozen several accounts," I said. "The larger holdings require your assistance." "Smart move." She made rapid notes. "The foundation needs protection too. Based on these transcripts, they're planning to use it as both a cash source and laundering mechanism." She looked up sharply. "Has Serafina noticed the account freezes?" "Not yet. I've maintained our daily patterns." "Good. We'll need to document every unauthorized transfer she's made. This will be critical for both divorce proceedings and potential criminal charges against Blackwell." "What about his Ponzi scheme? My investors are at risk." Martha's expression hardened. "This goes beyond divorce, Cassian. This is securities fraud, wire fraud, and potentially money laundering. Have you contacted the authorities?" "Not yet. I wanted legal protection in place first." Wise. "My contact at the FBI Financial Crimes Division is Diana Chen. With your documentation, they'll take this seriously." She hesitated. "What about this other matter? Your son?" I'd included Lucian's file in her materials. "I want to meet him. After all this, I need something real, Martha." Her expression softened. "I understand. We'll arrange it properly." She made another note. "By the way, I've heard interesting things about Thaddeus's wife, Isolda." "What kinds of things?" "That she's much smarter than she appears, comes from family money, real money, not Thaddeus's smoke and mirrors. Word is, she's been asking subtle questions about her husband's business dealings." I considered this. "You think she suspects?" "I think she might be a potential ally." "And right now, you need all the allies you can get." The signature room on the 95th floor of the Hancock Building offered both spectacular views and public visibility, perfect for a meeting that needed to appear innocent while being anything but. Isolda Blackwell arrived precisely on time, elegant in understated navy that suggested old money rather than new flash. Up close, I noticed the intelligence in her eyes that social gatherings hadn't revealed. "Mr. Dwyer, thank you for suggesting this meeting," she said as we were seated. "Thaddeus speaks highly of your business acumen. Please call me Cassian, and I appreciate your making time to discuss the Foundation Gala. Your experience with the Art Institute's events will be valuable." For the first 10 minutes, we maintained the pretense, discussing charity logistics while evaluating each other carefully. Then, during a natural pause, Isolda's demeanor subtly shifted. "You know, Cassian, I've always admired how you and Serafina work together on philanthropic efforts. Thaddeus and I have more separate approaches. Separate approaches can be healthy, I replied carefully, though alignment on fundamental values seems important. Indeed, values like honesty, transparency. She stirred her tea. Financial fidelity. The choice of words wasn't accidental. You've been married to Thaddeus for, I asked. 17 years, long enough to recognize patterns when they emerge, and to secure certain protections. Prudent. I thought so. She met my eyes directly. Especially after I hired my own financial forensic specialist 3 months ago. The pretense was cracking. I decided to test the waters more explicitly. Isolda, may I ask what first prompted your specialist's services? Discrepancies, accounts that should have contained certain amounts but didn't, explanations that weren't quite coherent. And a husband who started coming home wearing cologne I didn't purchase. Chanel Bleu? I asked. Her slight intake of breath confirmed it, the same scent I'd detected on Serafina. How long have you known? She asked quietly. About the affair, recently, about the financial improprieties. I'm still uncovering the extent. I have documentation you might find useful, she said, particularly regarding the structure of his investment vehicles. I have materials that might interest you as well, I replied, though I should note that what Thaddeus is involved in goes beyond marital infidelity. There may be criminal exposure. She nodded, unsurprised. I've kept my assets separate from the beginning. My father insisted on an ironclad prenup after he met Thaddeus for an hour. Smart man, your father. He recognized something in Thaddeus that took me years to see. She leaned forward slightly. I should mention that my investigation uncovered something unexpected about Thaddeus's past. Did you know he has a history of this exact pattern? His previous venture in Boston collapsed under similar circumstances. This was new information. No, I didn't. Different name back then. He was Theodore Blake until 2003. We were interrupted by the waiter. After he left, I met her gaze directly. Isolda, I believe we might have aligned interests in resolving this situation discreetly but thoroughly. I believe we might. She checked her watch. I have regular tennis lessons on Thursdays. Perhaps I could stop by the foundation office afterward to discuss gala details further? That would be perfect. As we prepared to leave, she added casually, I understand you'll be hosting the annual charity gala next month at the Drake. Yes, it's our largest fundraiser of the year. It seems an appropriate venue for many things to come full circle, doesn't it? Her meaning was clear. We were both thinking beyond today's meeting to a more definitive resolution. The following afternoon, I sat in a quiet corner of the university club, nervously straightening my tie for the 5th time. Maxwell had arranged the meeting through intermediaries, explaining to Lucian Mercer only that someone had information about his late mother that might interest him. When he entered, I recognized him immediately. Maxwell's photographs hadn't captured the full impact of seeing my own expressions and mannerisms in a younger face. He had my height, my build, but Elizabeth's warm brown eyes. He approached cautiously. Mr. Dwyer, I'm Lucian Mercer. I understand you knew my mother. I stood, extending my hand. Yes. Please, sit down. Thank you for coming. His handshake was firm, his gaze analytical, evaluating, just as I would. As he sat, I noticed his methodical movements, the way he positioned himself with a clear view of the room. So familiar, yet we were strangers. How did you know my mother? He asked directly. We were together briefly during my last year at Northwestern's business program. Elizabeth was brilliant, Economics with a focus on ethical market structures, if I remember correctly. He nodded, a flash of surprise crossing his face at the specific detail. That's right. She continued that work throughout her career. I took a deep breath. Lucian, I didn't ask you here just to reminisce about Elizabeth. There's something you should know. I placed a small folder on the table. I only discovered this recently myself. He opened it cautiously. Inside was a copy of his birth certificate, genetic test results Maxwell had somehow obtained, and a photograph of Elizabeth and me from our brief time together. I don't understand, he said, though his expression suggested he was beginning to. Elizabeth never told me she was pregnant. I didn't know about you until 2 weeks ago, when a private investigator I hired for an unrelated matter discovered the connection. His hands tightened on the documents. You're claiming to be my father. I'm not just claiming it. The DNA evidence is there. But more importantly, just looking at you. It's like seeing myself 30 years ago. Lucian stared at me, then back at the documents. Why would she never tell you, or me, about you? I don't know. Elizabeth and I parted amicably. There was no drama, no reason to hide this from me. Perhaps she had her reasons. This is... He shook his head. A lot to process. I understand. I've had the same reaction. I hesitated. I want to be clear. I'm not expecting anything from you. You've built your life without me. But if you're open to it, I'd like the chance to know you. What exactly do you do, Mr. Dwyer? I founded Dwyer Ventures 38 years ago. We specialize in ethical investment opportunities, primarily in Chicago's development and technology sectors. His expression changed subtly. Dwyer Ventures. Are you involved with Blackwell Lakefront Partners? The question caught me off guard. We've been approached about investing, yes. Why? Because my firm has been tracking their financial patterns. He leaned forward. I'm a forensic financial analyst specializing in fraud detection, and their structure has all the hallmarks of a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. I couldn't help the slight smile that formed. You investigate financial fraud. Yes? Why is that amusing? Because the unrelated matter I mentioned, the reason I hired the investigator who found you, involves uncovering exactly that type of fraud, perpetrated by Thaddeus Blackwell with my wife's assistance. Lucian's eyes widened. Your wife is involved with Blackwell? In every sense of the word. For the first time, a hint of a smile crossed his face. My smile, I realized. That's quite a way to start a father-son relationship. Not conventional, certainly. My specialty is tracing and documenting financial fraud patterns, he said thoughtfully. If you're building a case, I am, with significant evidence already. He considered for a moment. I'd need to see what you have. Of course. I paused. There's something else you should know. I'm planning to take action soon at a charity gala in 3 weeks. If you're interested in being involved, it might be illuminating. A public revelation? He seemed to approve. Efficient. I thought so. For the first time, a genuine connection flickered between us, a shared appreciation for strategic thinking. I'd like to see your evidence, he said finally. And then, perhaps we can talk more about Elizabeth. And about you. I'd like that very much. As we continued talking, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. In the midst of devastating betrayal, I discovered a connection that no one, not even Serafina, could taint. The next week, Lucian and I met in my office after hours. Spread across my conference table were the complete files from Maxwell's investigation, Martha's legal documentation, and Isolda's financial evidence against Thaddeus. "His pattern is remarkably consistent," Lucian observed, comparing documents from Thaddeus's Boston scheme with the current operation. "He targets established communities with strong social networks, leverages respected figures for credibility, then creates tiered investment structures with artificial scarcity." "The same approach he's using with my partners," I noted, "creating FOMO with exclusive investment tiers." "Exactly. What's different this time is scale. His ambition has grown. He's targeting significantly larger investments and using my reputation as a shortcut to trust." Lucian nodded, studying another document. "The foundation would have been the perfect vehicle for laundering returns, charitable donations in legitimate-seeming grants out. With my parents' name on it." I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Lucian looked up, studying me. After a moment's hesitation, he asked, "What were they like? Your parents?" The question caught me off guard. My father was brilliant but inflexible. Believed character was destiny. My mother was the diplomat, could make anyone feel valued. They built everything from nothing, survived the Depression, with their ethics intact. "My mother was like that too," Lucian said quietly. "Uncompromising, on principles." "Elizabeth always knew exactly where she stood," I agreed, remembering. "It's what I admired about her." A silence fell between us, not uncomfortable, but weighted with unspoken questions. "If you're wondering why she never told me about you," I said finally, "I've been asking myself the same question. I wasn't wealthy then, so it wasn't about money, and I would have wanted to be involved." Lucian studied the table, arranging documents with the same methodical precision I recognized in myself. "She said she didn't want to complicate your life, that you each had different paths." "She told you about me?" "Only at the end. She was sick for a long time before." He paused. 3 days before she died, she gave me a letter explaining who you were. Said I could contact you if I wanted, but there was no obligation either way." "And you chose not to?" He met my eyes directly. "I was angry at first. Then I looked you up, saw your success, your perfect-looking family. What would have been the point?" The irony wasn't lost on me. "And now here we are, connecting over financial fraud and marital betrayal." Unexpectedly, Lucian laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his serious face. "Not exactly Hallmark material." I smiled in return. "No, but perhaps more honest than most beginnings." "Speaking of honesty," he said, returning to the documents, "Blackwell's scheme is dangerously close to collapse. These cash flow projections show he needs substantial new investment within the next month, or early investors will start missing returns. Which is why he's so aggressively targeting my firm and foundation." "Exactly." Lucian indicated another document. "With your evidence and my analysis, we have enough for criminal charges. The timing of your gala could be perfect, right when his desperation peaks." Looking at him, this son I never knew, I felt an unfamiliar pride. Not in his existence as some extension of myself, but in the person he'd become entirely without my influence. "The gala is in 3 weeks," I said. "So would you consider attending as my guest? Your expertise would be valuable and—" "And?" he prompted when I hesitated. "And I'd like you to be there for this ending and whatever comes after." He considered for a moment, then nodded. "I'll be there." As we continued working, I realized this connection, forged in crisis but built on shared values, might be the most meaningful legacy I could salvage from the wreckage Serafina and Thaddeus had created. 3 days later, I was reviewing documents in our home study when Serafina burst in, her normally composed demeanor visibly rattled. "Why is our Vanguard account frozen?" she demanded. "And the Foundation discretionary fund?" I looked up calmly, having anticipated this moment. "Estate planning. Martha suggested consolidating certain assets for better tax positioning." "You didn't think to discuss this with me first?" She held up her phone displaying account rejection notices. "I tried to transfer funds for the charity venue deposit and was denied access." I noted she didn't mention which charity venue required a $50,000 transfer to a Cayman Islands account, the transaction my banking alerts had flagged this morning. "I apologize for the oversight," I said, removing my reading glasses. "Things have been hectic with the Lakefront Commons evaluation. Martha's handling the restructuring. I can have her call you tomorrow to explain the timeline." "This is ridiculous, Cassian. I have foundation responsibilities that can't wait for Martha's convenience." "Of course. Which specific payments are urgent? I can authorize them directly." Her expression flickered, annoyance mixed with calculation. "The gala venue needs a final deposit, and the scholarship committee needs to distribute next semester's funds." "Strange. The scholarship distributions were processed last week. I signed the authorizations myself." I kept my tone conversational. "As for the gala deposit, isn't that already handled? The Drake has been booked for months. There are additional services we're adding." "I see." I reached for my phone. "Let me contact Helen. She can process any legitimate foundation expenses immediately." "No!" Serafina's response came too quickly. "That's not necessary. It can wait until the accounts are unfrozen." "If you're sure." I returned to my documents, watching her peripherally. "Martha says the restructuring should be complete within 2 weeks, well before the gala." She studied me for any sign of suspicion, but decades in business had perfected my poker face. "Fine," she said finally. "But next time, keep me informed about financial changes. We're supposed to be partners, Cassian." The word partners hung in the air between us, heavy with irony that only I recognized. "Of course. By the way," I added casually, "Isolda Blackwell has been extremely helpful with the gala planning. She has quite an eye for detail." A flicker of unease crossed Serafina's face. "Isolda? I didn't realize you two were working together." "She's been invaluable. We've had several productive meetings discussing the event flow." "Thaddeus never mentioned that." I shrugged slightly. "Perhaps it didn't seem important to him, though she mentioned he's been working unusual hours lately, some sort of investment crunch, I believe." Serafina's composure returned. "Yes, the lakefront project is entering a critical phase. Speaking of which, the committee is meeting tomorrow to finalize arrangements. I may be late again." "I understand." I smiled politely. "These projects require dedication." After she left, I texted Maxwell to maintain surveillance on tomorrow's committee meeting and updated Martha on our conversation. The accounts would remain frozen despite Serafina's protests. The trap was set, and she had no idea she was already caught. FBI Financial Crimes Investigator Diana Chen received me in a sparse federal building meeting room the following Monday. Her crisp efficiency reminded me of Lucian. "Mr. Dwyer," she began after introductions, "your attorney Martha Goldstein speaks highly of you. She indicated you have evidence regarding Thaddeus Blackwell's investment activities?" "Substantial evidence," I confirmed, placing my carefully prepared file on the table. "Documentation of what appears to be a sophisticated Ponzi scheme targeting Chicago investors, including many of my clients." She opened the file, scanning documents with practiced speed. "We've had Blackwell on our radar for 8 months, but lacked sufficient evidence to move forward. His previous operation in Boston collapsed before charges could be filed. So I've recently learned. He was operating under a different name then. Theodore Blake, she nodded. Changed it after the statute of limitations expired. Smart timing on his part. She continued reviewing the materials, occasionally making notes. This recording transcript, it's legally obtained? Private investigator, using accepted methods, no illegal surveillance. And these financial transfers from your accounts, your wife made these without authorization? Correct. I've documented the account parameters requiring dual approval, which she circumvented. She studied me carefully. Mr. Dwyer, I should note that pursuing this investigation will likely result in your wife facing criminal charges as well. Are you prepared for that? I understand the implications. My concern is protecting innocent investors and holding all responsible parties accountable. Admirable, she said, though her expression remained neutral. Based on what you've provided, we have grounds to proceed. The evidence of interstate wire fraud is particularly compelling. What's your timeline? Typically, we'd move within 2 to 3 weeks once we verify and supplement your documentation. The annual charity gala for my foundation is in 18 days, I said. Blackwell will be there, along with most of his current and prospective investors. My financial analyst believes his scheme will require new capital by then or begin collapsing. She considered this. That timing could be advantageous for evidence gathering, maximizes investor protection if we can prevent additional victims. My thoughts exactly. I'll need to discuss this with my superiors, but a coordinated approach might make sense. We could have agents present at your event. I can provide complete attendee lists, venue layout, security details, whatever you need. She nodded, gathering the materials. We'll be in touch through Attorney Goldstein regarding next steps. She paused. Mr. Dwyer, are you prepared for the public fallout when this becomes known? Your reputation, your foundation, your personal life, all will be scrutinized. I've built my career on transparency and integrity, Agent Chen. I can weather the scrutiny. What I didn't add was that reputation, at this point, seemed far less important than truth, and that my most important discovery through this ordeal had nothing to do with Serafina's betrayal, but with the son I never knew existed. The Drake Hotel's grand ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and meticulously arranged table settings. At 5 o'clock, 3 hours before guests would arrive, I surveyed the space with Helen at my side. Audio-visual check is complete, she reported efficiently. The presentation system has been tested with the files you provided. Bernard Whitfield confirmed he'll be seated at table 3 with the Business Roundtable members. Excellent. And the seating arrangement? As directed. Mrs. Dwyer and Mr. Blackwell at the head table with you. The Jameson Group investors at table 1 with Mrs. Chen and her colleagues. Mr. Mercer at table 2 with the foundation board. I nodded, mentally checking off elements of tonight's carefully orchestrated event. And Isolda? Mrs. Blackwell requested seat adjustment to table 4, with clear sightlines to the stage. Helen's expression remained professionally neutral, though she'd been briefed on the evening's true purpose. She'll arrive early to check final details. Perfect. Martha arrived, impeccable in formal attire that concealed the gravity of her role tonight. Everything ready on your end? She asked quietly. Every detail. I straightened my already perfect bow tie. Yours? Agent Chen has 8 agents positioned throughout the event. Warrants are prepared. The moment Thaddeus presents his investment opportunity, they'll have everything they need. And the documentation for Serafina? Martha's eyes softened slightly. All in order, though I'm sorry it's come to this, Cassian. Don't be. The woman I married disappeared long ago, if she ever existed at all. The hotel doors opened as Isolda arrived, elegant in understated black that seemed appropriate for the evening's true nature. "The flowers are lovely," she commented as she approached, our established code indicating all was proceeding as planned on her end. "Thaddeus is meeting with potential investors until 7, then coming directly here." "Excellent. We've saved him a prime seat." A slight smile crossed her face. "Indeed. After tonight's presentation, I believe everyone will see things quite clearly." As staff continued preparations around us, Bernard Whitfield arrived early, as requested. As chairman of the Chicago Business Roundtable, his presence signaled business community support. "Everything in place, Cassian?" he asked quietly. "Yes. Your statement afterward will be particularly meaningful." He nodded gravely. "I've reviewed the evidence. The community stands with you. What Blackwell attempted threatens everything we've built." Lucian was the last of my core allies to arrive, his presence still unfamiliar but increasingly essential. He approached with a tablet containing last-minute financial analysis. "His accounts show significant movement today," he reported. "Large transfers, suggesting he's preparing either for major investments or potential flight." Perfect timing, then. As guests began arriving, I took a final moment alone, straightening my cufflinks, my father's cufflinks, and centering myself for what was to come. Tonight would end a 30-year marriage and a 4-decade career as I'd known it. But it would also begin something new, something authentic in a way my life with Serafina had never been. 30 minutes later, I watched from across the room as Serafina and Thaddeus entered together, his hand lingering inappropriately at the small of her back. They separated immediately, maintaining public pretense, unaware that their charade was already over. Let the evening begin. By 9 o'clock, dinner was concluding, and the ballroom hummed with 200 of Chicago's most influential citizens. Serafina performed her role as foundation chair flawlessly, moving between tables with practiced charm while avoiding direct interaction with me. Thaddeus worked the room with equal skill, laying groundwork for his presentation. I approached the podium precisely on schedule. "Good evening, friends and supporters. For 40 years, the Dwyer Foundation has provided educational opportunities to deserving students who lacked financial means. My parents believed integrity was our most valuable asset, a principle I've tried to honor in business and philanthropy." From my position, I could see Agent Chen and her colleagues strategically positioned throughout the room. Lucian and Isolda at their respective tables, Martha near the exit. All the pieces in place. Tonight, we have a special presentation about the Foundation's future. But before I introduce our guest speaker, I'd like to share some relevant context. This deviation from the program caught Serafina's attention. Her smile faltered slightly as she watched from table 1. I continued smoothly. "Ethical investment has been my life's work. Due diligence isn't just a process. It's a responsibility to everyone who trusts us with their financial future." I pressed a button on the podium remote. Behind me, the projection screen displayed the first document, a side-by-side comparison of Thaddeus's claimed lakefront commons permits and the actual city records. What you're seeing is the difference between representation and reality. The development project many of you have been approached about doesn't exist beyond elaborate renderings and falsified documents. A murmur spread through the room. Thaddeus half rose from his seat, face darkening. "Mr. Dwyer, this is hardly the venue." "On the contrary," I interrupted calmly, advancing to the next slide showing financial flowcharts. "This is exactly the venue. Many potential victims are in this room." The screen now displayed Lucian's forensic analysis of the Ponzi scheme structure, with highlighted investor names visible to all. The pattern is clear and documented. Early investors receive returns paid by new investor capital, not legitimate earnings. Meanwhile, substantial funds are diverted to offshore accounts. Thaddeus was fully standing now, looking desperately toward the exit where he suddenly noticed federal agents moving to block escape routes. "This is slander," he declared, voice rising. "I'll sue for defamation." "Truth is an absolute defense against slander, Mr. Blackwell. Or should I say, Mr. Blake? Your Boston operation followed the same pattern before you changed your name." Gasps spread through the audience as I advanced to documentation of his previous identity and failed scheme. "Cassian, stop this immediately!" Serafina had reached the edge of the stage, her public facade cracking. "You're embarrassing yourself and the Foundation." "I'm protecting the Foundation," I corrected calmly, "and everyone in this room." The next slide displayed transfer records from our joint accounts to Blackwell's shell companies, with Serafina's signature highlighted. Unfortunately, this scheme had inside help. My wife provided both investor introductions and diverted foundation funds without authorization. The room fell completely silent. Serafina's face drained of color as she saw the evidence displayed for all to see. Beyond her, I noticed Bernard Whitfield and other business leaders moving away from Thaddeus, physically representing the community's judgment. "Federal authorities have been provided with complete documentation," I continued, nodding toward Agent Chen, who now approached Thaddeus. "But I felt those who trusted us deserved to hear this directly." "FBI," Chen announced, reaching Thaddeus. "Mr. Blackwell, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering." As agents moved in, Thaddeus made a desperate attempt to reach the podium. "This is a mistake. Dwyer's evidence is fabricated. Serafina, tell them." But Serafina remained frozen, watching her carefully constructed world collapse. When she finally moved, it was toward me, perhaps to plead, perhaps to threaten. But Isolda smoothly intercepted her, speaking words I couldn't hear, but which stopped Serafina in her tracks. I remained at the podium, maintaining composure as federal agents escorted Thaddeus out. Throughout the room, shocked conversations erupted among guests, realizing how close they'd come to financial ruin. "The Foundation will continue its mission," I concluded calmly. "Integrity isn't tested when things are easy, but when doing the right thing costs you something precious. Thank you for your attention this evening." As I stepped away from the podium, Bernard immediately took my place to manage the aftermath, his authoritative presence reassuring the stunned crowd. Justice, it seemed, had been served. The ballroom had mostly emptied, leaving small clusters of people processing the evening's revelations. Bernard and key business leaders surrounded me, offering explicit support that would prove crucial in the coming days. "The community stands with you, Cassian," Bernard stated firmly, his hand on my shoulder. "What you did tonight took tremendous courage." Nearby, Martha spoke with concerned investors, assuring them that recovery efforts were already underway. Agent Chen had left with Thaddeus, but her colleagues continued gathering statements from potential victims. Across the room, Lucian was engaged in conversation with several Foundation board members, his expertise already proving valuable. Our eyes met briefly, professional respect mixed with something more personal that we were still defining. Isolda approached, her composure intact despite the evening's chaos. "Well executed," she said quietly. "Thaddeus never saw it coming." "Your contribution was essential," I acknowledged. "What did you say to Serafina that stopped her approach?" A slight smile. I simply informed her that her belongings would be packed and waiting with the doorman at our building, as I've purchased her lover's share of their apartment as part of our divorce settlement. Efficient. I thought so. Her expression softened slightly. What happens next for you, Cassian? Before I could answer, Serafina appeared before us, her usual poise replaced by barely controlled fury. "How dare you humiliate me publicly?" she hissed. 30 years together, and this is how you choose to end it? You ended it, I replied calmly. I merely revealed the truth. The truth? Her laugh was bitter. The truth is, you were never fully present in our marriage, always focused on your precious firm, your parents' legacy. Perhaps, I acknowledged, but that didn't justify betrayal. You had choices, Serafina. You could have addressed your concerns, suggested counseling, even asked for divorce. Instead, you chose deception. What happens now? She demanded, glancing between Isolda and me. Now we all face the consequences of our choices, I said simply. Martha will contact you tomorrow regarding divorce proceedings. The authorities will determine appropriate charges related to financial misconduct. You'd send me to prison? After 30 years? I didn't make that decision. You did, with every unauthorized transfer and every lie. I maintained eye contact. Goodbye, Serafina. She stared at me for a long moment, perhaps searching for weakness or reconsideration. Finding none, she finally turned and walked away, alone for perhaps the first time in decades. Lucian approached as she left, watching her departure with analytical detachment. The FBI agent mentioned they'll need additional documentation tomorrow. We'll provide whatever they need, I assured him, then turned to include both him and Isolda. I think we could all use some peace after tonight, perhaps a quieter dinner tomorrow to discuss next steps. Both nodded agreement. As we prepared to leave, I paused to look once more at the foundation logo projected on the wall. My parents' name representing values that had guided me through this ordeal. Whatever came next would be built on truth rather than illusion, a foundation far stronger than what I'd lost. The week following the gala transformed my office into Crisis Management Central. Martha coordinated legal responses while Helen managed the flood of calls from investors, media, and concerned associates. Lucian had taken temporary leave from his firm to help untangle Thaddeus's financial web. We've identified approximately 68% of diverted funds, Lucian reported, indicating complex flowcharts spread across the conference table. With the accounts frozen by federal authorities, we should be able to recover a significant portion for legitimate investors. How significant? I asked, removing my reading glasses to rub tired eyes. Based on preliminary analysis, possibly 70%, better than most fraud recoveries. Martha entered with her own update. Serafina's attorneys have made initial contact. They're suggesting a quiet settlement. What are they offering? Return of all diverted funds in exchange for reduced charges and discretion regarding her role. I considered this. The funds were going to be recovered anyway through federal action. What's their real offer? Essentially, they're hoping you'll use your influence to persuade prosecutors to focus on Blackwell and treat Serafina as a secondary participant. That's not my decision to make. The evidence speaks for itself. Martha nodded, unsurprised. That's what I told them. They'll be back with a more serious proposal once reality sets in. A soft knock interrupted us as Agent Chen arrived for our scheduled meeting. Mr. Dwyer, we've completed initial assessment of Mr. Blackwell's accounts, she reported. Your analyst's work has been extremely helpful. We've rarely seen such comprehensive documentation from a civilian. Lucian acknowledged this with a modest nod. "What's Thaddeus's status?" I asked. "Denied bail as a flight risk." We found packed bags and one-way tickets to non-extradition countries in his apartment. And Serafina? Surrendered her passport this morning as a condition of remaining free during investigation. We're continuing to assess her level of involvement. As the meeting continued, I found myself momentarily distracted. The operational details mattered, of course, but seemed suddenly less important than the personal revelations this crisis had precipitated. Across the table, Lucian was explaining a particularly complex money trail to Agent Chen, his methodical approach so familiar it was almost unsettling. "Mr. Dwyer?" Chen's voice brought me back. "We'll need your statement finalized by Friday." "Of course," I refocused. "Whatever you need." After she left, Lucian studied me with unexpected concern. "You seemed distant during that discussion." "Just processing everything. It's been an intense week." He nodded, understanding without prying. "I've been thinking about the foundation. With proper restructuring, the damage could be minimized. I've drafted some recommendations." He handed me a folder containing thoughtful analysis of the foundation's vulnerabilities and suggested governance improvements. Reading through his proposals, I was struck by how they aligned with my own instincts while offering perspectives I hadn't considered. "These are excellent," I acknowledged. "Would you consider a more formal role in implementing them?" The question clearly surprised him. "You're offering me a position with the foundation?" "I'm suggesting we might have complementary skills to rebuild what's been damaged." I chose my words carefully. "No pressure or obligation, just an opportunity if you're interested." Something shifted in his expression, a cautious openness. "I'll consider it." For the first time since this crisis began, I felt something beyond the grim satisfaction of justice served. This unexpected connection with Lucian represented something neither Serafina nor Thaddeus could taint, a future built on authenticity rather than deception. The following Tuesday, I met Serafina at Martha's office for preliminary divorce discussions. The conference room's neutral setting emphasized the businesslike nature of dissolving 30 years of marriage. "Mr. Dwyer has prepared an initial settlement proposal," Martha began, sliding documents across the table. Serafina's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman from a prestigious firm, reviewed them silently before responding. "These terms are quite punitive, given the length of the marriage." "They reflect financial reality," Martha countered. "Specifically, the documented $3.2 million in unauthorized transfers that constitute both marital asset dissipation and potential criminal activity." Serafina finally spoke directly to me. "Is this really necessary, Cassian? Reducing 30 years to spreadsheets and allegations?" I met her gaze steadily. "What would you suggest instead?" "We built a life together. Whatever mistakes were made, doesn't that count for anything?" "It counted for everything," I replied quietly. "That's why the betrayal matters." Her attorney interjected, "Mrs. Dwyer is prepared to make significant concessions regarding financial matters in exchange for discretion about certain personal aspects of the separation." The time for discretion passed when Mrs. Dwyer chose to assist in a fraud targeting her husband's investors and foundation, Martha stated flatly. "Perhaps we should speak privately," Serafina suggested, glancing meaningfully at our attorneys. After a moment's consideration, I nodded. 5 minutes. When we were alone, Serafina's demeanor changed, the defensive edge replaced by something resembling the woman I'd once known. "Cassian, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But destroying me won't undo what happened. This isn't about destruction. It's about consequences." 30 years, she repeated, her voice softening. Doesn't that merit some compassion? I've shown compassion by offering terms that allow you to maintain dignity and financial security despite your actions. What you're asking for is absolution. And you can't provide that? A hint of the old connection flickered between us. No. I kept my voice gentle but firm. What happened wasn't a momentary lapse or a single betrayal. It was months of calculated deception targeting not just me, but everything I've built. I never intended. Intentions stopped mattering when actions continued after the first lie, the first betrayal, the first stolen dollar. She studied me, perhaps seeing for the first time that my resolve wasn't vindictive, but final. You've changed. Perhaps I've simply become clearer about what matters. When our attorneys returned, the meeting proceeded efficiently. Ausa Serafina accepted the core terms with minimal negotiation, a tacit acknowledgement that her position offered little leverage. As we concluded, I removed my wedding ring and placed it on the table, not dramatically, but with the simple finality of closing a book whose story had ended. I wish you well, Serafina, I said, meaning it despite everything. I hope you find whatever you were looking for. She didn't respond directly, but as she gathered her things, she paused. Your son, Lucian, he seems a good man. Yes, he is. At least something worthwhile came from all this. It was the closest thing to genuine insight I'd heard from her in years. As she left with her attorney, I remained seated, looking at the empty chair across from me. 30 years reduced to legal documents and polite goodbyes. Yet strangely, I felt lighter than I had in months. Martha returned, touching my shoulder gently. You okay? Better than okay, I realized aloud. Ready to move forward. 3 weeks after the gala, I hosted a small dinner at my home, not the lakefront mansion Serafina had insisted upon, which was now being sold as part of the settlement, but the smaller Lincoln Park property I'd owned before our marriage, a place that suddenly felt more like home than anywhere had in years. Around the table sat the people who had formed my core support through the crisis. Martha with her legal wisdom, Bernard representing community continuity, Helen, whose loyalty had proven invaluable, Isolda, whose unexpected friendship had emerged from shared betrayal, and Lucian, still somewhat reserved, but increasingly comfortable in this unusual family we were forming. To new beginnings, Bernard proposed, raising his glass, and to old values that never lose their worth. Hear, hear, Martha seconded, as everyone joined the toast. Dinner conversation flowed naturally, touching on the foundation's future, the recovery efforts for affected investors, and Thaddeus's pending trial. But unlike the intense strategy sessions of recent weeks, tonight allowed space for personal connections. I've been thinking about your proposal, Lucian said during a quiet moment as dessert was served, about working with the foundation. And? I tried to keep my tone casual, despite my interest in his decision. I'd like to explore it, but with a specific focus, a new initiative focused on financial literacy and fraud prevention. That sounds valuable, I encouraged. My firm has agreed to a 6-month sabbatical. I could use that time to develop the program while maintaining my independence. I understood his caution, not wanting to leap too quickly into a permanent arrangement when our relationship was still developing. A thoughtful approach. The foundation would benefit from your expertise, whatever form it takes. Across the table, Isolda was describing her plans to redirect her family's considerable resources toward arts education, a passion she'd suppressed during her marriage to Thaddeus. Sometimes, loss creates unexpected space for growth, she observed, catching my eye with understanding that came from shared experience. As conversation continued, I found myself observing more than participating, appreciating the authentic connections forming around me. These relationships weren't based on social advantage or financial gain, but on shared values and mutual respect. Later, as guests prepared to leave, Martha pulled me aside. "You seem different, Cassian, more present somehow." "I feel different, lighter, despite everything. Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted makes room for what you actually need." She squeezed my hand. "I'm happy for you." After the others had gone, Lucian lingered, examining family photographs he hadn't noticed during previous visits. "Is this your father?" he asked, indicating a formal portrait. "Yes, and my mother beside him. They founded the original scholarship that grew into the foundation. You favor him." Same eyes. "And you have his hands," I noted. "Builder's hands, despite the academic work." An unexpected moment of connection hung between us. 3 generations linked by features and mannerisms that transcended our complicated history. "I'd like to visit their graves," Lucian said suddenly, "if that would be all right." The request surprised me with its significance. "I'd like that very much. Perhaps this weekend." He nodded, a small but meaningful commitment to continuing our journey. This weekend. As he left, I remained in the quiet house, not empty as I'd once feared, but full of possibilities I'd never anticipated when this ordeal began. What started as betrayal had somehow cleared space for authenticity I hadn't known was missing. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, rebuilding the foundation, supporting the prosecution's case, establishing new routines. But tonight, for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was exactly where I needed to be.